Jimmy Fallon shocked when Lady Gaga suddenly holds her breath. After seeing this name, Lady Gaga stopped mid-sentence. Not at the end of a thought. Not after a pause. Mid-word, while Jimmy Fallon was still nodding, still leaning in, still holding his index card as though the conversation was going exactly the way conversations go. She looked down at the piece of paper on the desk. Her hand went flat against the table. And for 8 seconds, in front of 300 people, she did not breathe. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and The Tonight Show had been building toward this booking for weeks. Lady Gaga did not do interviews often. Not the long kind. Not the kind where someone sits across from her without a filter and asks about the years before everything became what it became. The audience that night was the generation that had been shaped by her, 55 to 70. The people who had watched their own children or grandchildren find something in her music that reached places nothing else could reach. And who had come to understand, in that second-hand way, that she was something more than a performer. They had come from Queens, from Bergen County, from a town in Connecticut that sent 3 of them in together because the tickets had come available on a Thursday and none of them had hesitated. Everything was prepared. Everything was in place. A segment producer named Diane Marsh, who had worked in television for 19 years, would say afterward that she had never once felt the room change temperature during a taping. She felt it that night. A piece of paper arrived on the desk between questions. Not an envelope. Not a letter. Just a single folded sheet, edges soft. The paper slightly thickened the way paper gets when it has been unfolded and refolded many times over many years. Jimmy slid it across without ceremony, without preamble, because that was how the segment had been designed, quietly, between 2 other things, so it arrived before she could prepare for it. Not printed, not typed, just a name. Handwritten in blue ink, slightly faded, in the careful cursive of someone who had learned to write in a different era. Lady Gaga's hand went flat on the table. Her head dropped. Slightly. Her eyes went to the paper and stayed there. Her chest rose once, slowly, and then she held it, held the breath. The way a person holds something they are afraid to release. Gaga, Jimmy's voice, low, careful. You okay? The entire studio froze. 300 people held their breath. The band had gone quiet without being asked. People in the front rows leaned forward, not sure what they were watching. She was 40 years old. She was composed. She was the last person in the room anyone would have predicted to come undone in the first 40 minutes of a conversation. His voice, when hers finally came, was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by her microphone. Sister Colette. Just that. 2 words. A name. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1997. Lady Gaga wasn't always Lady Gaga. The spectacle, the armor. The woman who turned pain into architecture and called it pop music. In the autumn of 1997, Stefani Germanotta was 11 years old and enrolled at the Convent of the Sacred Heart on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where she had been a student since the 1st grade. She was not yet any version of the person she would become. She was a girl who played piano by ear before she could read notation, who preferred the music room to the lunchroom, and who had begun in the way children begin things without knowing they are beginning them, to understand that the place she felt most like herself was in front of a keyboard with no one watching. The music teacher that year was a woman named Sister Colette Marchand. She was 63 years old, a member of the Religious of the Sacred Heart, who had been teaching at the school for 21 years. She had studied piano at a conservatory in Lyon, France, before taking her vows, and she carried that training the way certain people carry a language they learned before the language they speak, quietly, underneath everything, available in moments when nothing else would do. She was not a warm teacher in the obvious sense. She did not dispense praise easily. She had a standard, and she held it without apology. And the students who thrived under her were the ones who understood that her attention, when it came, was the real thing. She gave Stefani Germanata her attention, not because the girl was obedient, not because she followed instructions, because she played a C major scale one afternoon in September and arrived at the final note slightly early. Not wrong, but early. And when Sister Colette said nothing and simply looked at her, Stefani played it again, on her own, and arrived exactly on time. She had understood the correction without being given it. Sister Colette kept her after class that day. She asked her what she heard when she played. Not what she thought. What she heard. Stefani said she heard something that wasn't in the notes. Sister Colette was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That is the only thing worth learning to find." They worked together every week that year, twice a week, and then 3 times when the schedule allowed. Not performing. Not preparing for recitals. Working on the space between notes, on the idea that music is what happens in the silence that the sound creates. Sister Colette had a quality that Stefani would not find words for until she was much older. She taught without diminishing. She corrected without reducing. She could tell you that something was wrong in a way that made you feel larger for having heard it. She came alone to every session because the other teachers left at 4. She stayed until 5:30, sometimes 6, in the small practice room on the 3rd floor, with its out-of-tune upright piano and its single window that faced a courtyard no one used. She had been doing this for 21 years with students who came and went and rarely looked back, and she did it with the same attention every time as if each one was the first. In June, at the end of the school year, she gave Stefani a piece of paper before the summer break. Not sheet music, just a note. Her name at the top in careful cursive, a single sentence beneath it, and her signature at the bottom. She pressed it into Stefani's hand in the doorway of the practice room and said nothing else. Stefani read it on the subway going home. She folded it in half and put it in the front pocket of her school bag. She moved it to a book that fall. She moved it again when the book wore out. Sister Colette died in June of the following year, a stroke, swift and complete, on a Thursday morning. She was 64 years old. She had been at the school until the last week of classes. Stefani Germanata did not find out until September, when she returned for 7th grade, and the practice room had a different teacher, and no one said anything because children are not always told. She had carried the note for 27 years. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The name on the piece of paper on the desk tonight had not come from a living person. It had come from a woman named Claire Marchand, Sister Colette's niece, who lived in Lyon, France, and who had contacted the show's talent relations office 6 weeks before the taping. Claire was 58 years old. She had been sorting through her aunt's belongings, kept all this time by the order, in a small room in the convent, and had found in a wooden box beneath a stack of music theory notebooks a series of notes. Student names, dates, 1 line beside each name, in her aunt's handwriting, describing what she had seen in them. Beside the name Stefani Germanata, the year 1997, her aunt had written 4 words. She hears what isn't there. Claire had recognized the name when she saw it, understood what it had become, and had written to the show because she believed her aunt's words deserved to travel. She had flown from Lyon to New York with the original notebook page, and she was sitting in the 5th row when Jimmy Fallon slid the folded sheet, containing only her aunt's name, written in Claire's hand, across the desk. Behind the scenes, Lady Gaga had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had been told only that someone in the audience had a connection to her past. She had not been told who or what. She had agreed, at Claire's request, not to be briefed further. She had told the segment producer in the dressing room before the show, in a voice that was very quiet and very certain, "I want her to feel like a person, not a moment." But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. The breath she had been holding finally released, slow, careful, the way a person releases something they have been carrying without knowing its weight. She looked up from the name on the paper. Claire Marchand was already standing in the 5th row, holding a notebook page in both hands. Lady Gaga saw her and went completely still. Jimmy Fallon looked from one to the other and then stood from his chair, quietly, without instruction, and stepped to the side. 300 people had the whole picture now. 300 people understood exactly what was in the room. Lady Gaga came off the stage without being asked. She walked up the center aisle in the way she almost never walked anywhere, without performance, without presentation, just a woman crossing a room. When she reached Claire, she stopped, and Claire held out the notebook page with both hands, and Lady Gaga took it carefully and read it. 4 words. Her aunt's handwriting. 1997. She hears what isn't there. Lady Gaga's hands were shaking. She looked up. She knew. Her voice barely above a whisper. I never told her. I didn't have the words. But she knew. Claire's voice was steady. She wrote it down the same day. She kept notes on all of them. But yours, she underlined it. The silence lasted 4 seconds. 5. I didn't find out she died until September. Her voice broke clean and sudden. I went back in the fall, and she was just gone, and nobody said anything, and I was 12, and I didn't know how to ask. She talked about you. Claire's hands were trembling. Not often. But she said your name once, when I visited. She said there was a girl in her class who heard the silence between the notes. She said she thought that girl was going to make people feel less alone. Lady Gaga put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes closed. Jimmy Fallon was not at his desk. He was standing at the edge of the stage, with both hands pressed together in front of his face, and he was crying in the open, uncurated way of someone who has stopped managing it. He said, to the room, to no one specifically, folks, I think we need to let this happen. Questlove stood up from the drum kit. The director did not cut to commercial. The cameraman closest to the aisle did not move. The standing ovation started somewhere in the back and moved forward and outward through the room the way sound moves when the room is ready for it, not all at once, but unstoppably. Lady Gaga and Claire Marchand stood in the aisle for a long time. The notebook page was still in Lady Gaga's hands. She was not performing anything. She was just present, in the full and unguarded way of a person who has been handed back something they did not know they had lost. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The notebook page is now framed in Lady Gaga's home in Malibu, next to the upright piano in the room where she writes. Claire Marchand flew back to Lyon 4 days after the taping. Before she left, Lady Gaga asked her one question, whether there was a way to honor her aunt's name at the school. Claire said she didn't know. 2 months later, the practice room on the 3rd floor of the Convent of the Sacred Heart, the small room with the out-of-tune upright, and the window facing the courtyard no one uses, was quietly restored and rededicated. A small plaque was placed beside the door. It carries one line in the same careful cursive as the notebook. She hears what isn't there. 11 weeks after the taping, Claire sent Jimmy Fallon a photograph taken in that room before the restoration was complete. The old piano still there, afternoon light coming through the courtyard window, the room exactly as it had been in 1997. He framed it and put it on his desk. It is still there. Some silences wait 27 years to be heard.